It's no secret that a lot of people are starting to discover and use cannabis products for the first time. It's because of this that dosing is now more important than ever. On this episode, Jesse Betend talked to Missy Bradley, brand director and co-founder at Stillwater Brands. Stillwater Brands' deep background in food manufacturing and water-soluble cannabinoid technology has led to the production of some of the best-selling and most trusted edibles in Colorado. Missy talks about why it's important to create a product that does what it says it's going to do every time. They also talk about why Ripple can provide doses and flower options for anybody interested in consuming cannabis, and why the media is not taking the time to understand the plant. For Trichomes.com, I'm producer David Fortin, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we feature leaders of the cannabis industry. We talk to everyone from farmers to CEOs and public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond.
So first things first, let me just say, Missy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jesse.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Let's just start at the beginning. What exactly is Ripple?
Ripple is a water-soluble cannabinoid powder that can be added to any food or beverage. It was initially a product that we had made in order to produce a cup of tea. And what I mean by that is our first product was a microdose tea. It was Stillwater tea. And in order to make a good cup of tea, we had to render the THC water soluble. We didn't want an oil slick sitting on the top of your mug. We wanted a product that looked good, tasted good, and was effective. So we worked to create this water soluble form of THC. And in doing so, inadvertently created what is now our best selling product, Ripple.
And so like give us an idea of kind of what you're dealing with here. Not only are you creating the powder, but are you dealing with, is there like a flavor that you're trying to mask? How did you get to where you are with Ripple?
Absolutely. So initially when we were creating the tea product, we had strain specific SKUs. So our mint tea was an indica. Our black tea was a sativa, and we had a hybrid for our green tea. We quickly learned that we couldn't get enough of a supply in the strains that we were working with to make that work. And then B, that the terpenes were so varied from strain to strain, from extract to extract, that we could not make a standardized product. So we ended up bringing in distillate and isolate to work with because it removes most of the terpenes and therefore most of the flavor profile. Even still with, we've had a handful of suppliers over the years. We don't do the extraction ourselves. The inputs are still so varied and so hard to work with. All of that being said, we've pretty much streamlined the process at this point, and we've figured out what we need in terms of inputs. But yeah, those terpenes, when you're creating a flavorless product, really, really throw a wrench in things.
Yeah, and I imagine tea is kind of a natural first place to start because you have kind of an herbally, backdrop or palette, I guess, that you're working with.
Yeah, so people are kind of expecting perhaps a green flavor associated.
Right. But that is, pretty significant where I feel like, with most edibles, there's still a flavor that's in there. And in some cases, it might even be kind of part of the experience for some people. Either it just signifies that, yes, this really does have what I'm looking for in it, or something like that. So was the goal to be able to completely mask the flavor and create something that feels indistinguishable from its non-THC or CBD relative?
It absolutely it was. And the reason for that was that we were looking to create a product that, to start out with, my co-founder's grandmother would be comfortable ingesting. So we didn't want it to elicit sort of that quote unquote marijuana smell or taste. We wanted it to be something that was approachable, that people felt safe consuming. So to create that tea product, we wanted to try to remove as much flavor as possible so that it would just taste like a cup of tea. And also it was 2.5 milligrams of THC. So we weren't expecting people to get high so much as to take the edge off. So really that all came back to, we believed in the idea of cannabis being a functional ingredient, but there are so many people who are scared of it. And in order to sort of open it up to the masses and to allow anybody to feel comfortable ingesting it, we felt like we had to remove a lot of the things that people associated with the plant. So that taste, that smell.
And I did want to ask you, you mentioned just now that you were creating this as like a microdose tea. So I imagine that you had a certain idea of who you were kind of targeting. Who is the ideal customer? Is it always new cannabis users, or who were you hoping this would attract?
So yes, initially it was very much sort of the new user. We always used to say the young mother. So stressed, overworked, just the person who has a glass of wine at night. We felt like low doses of THC could be just as effective and perhaps more beneficial than drinking a glass or two of wine every night. So we really wanted to show sort of the novice cannabis consumer that there was a product for them. Over time, that has definitely shifted. So once we recognized that we had a product in Ripple and started selling Ripple as a product on its own, we also recognized that we had created something that everybody could benefit from. And then it didn't just have to come as a low dose product, that we could provide doses and flavor options for anybody interested in consuming cannabis.
It seems to me that the form that it takes as a powder gives you a lot of perhaps flexibility in how it's perceived, or the perception of the product might be different because it comes in this powder form. What my mind goes to is sort of the like high C or like vitamin supplement packets or something like that you might add to your water. Do you think that the form has something to do with, first of all, does that allow you to avoid regulations, like with specific markets like vapes that have certain testing? How does that impact you guys from a regulation side, the fact that you're selling it in a powder form?
It doesn't impact us at all. I mean, we still are adhering to the same regulation for Colorado Cannabis Marijuana Enforcement Division. So in that way, it doesn't change anything. What you refer to with this sort of high C or vitamin supplement, we very much had in our minds that we saw this as a form of cannabinoid supplementation. So if you are a person who is looking to take the product every day, this is a way that you can add it to your lifestyle. You can put it in your morning smoothie. You can add it to your ramen. You can add it to baked goods. But these were all ways that people could be consuming cannabis without smoking or vaping or eating an edible that perhaps didn't taste so good. So there's very much something there. And then the other side of it is that it actually makes things harder for us. Creating the powder is a very difficult process. Our head of R&D was at Mars Candy for over 20 years before he came to us. And he has been, for the past 6 years now, innovating on this product and trying to make it better. And it is just super tough to create a consistent soluble cannabinoid product and then have a consistent fill. Just the fill weight alone in those packets is super difficult. We had a pharmaceutical grade dosing machine when we first started up production, and that couldn't fill with the proper consistency. So we ended up having to engineer our own fill mechanism to make sure that we were getting the right dose in each of those packets.
That's really fascinating. And that does raise a really good point, because I imagine that dosing is pretty crucial. A lot of the fear here for someone who's never used it before is, I imagine, wanting to be able to control how much they're taking in and knowing that exactly what's in the package is what they're going to be getting. And, there was a time where edibles didn't necessarily even tell you how much THC was inside them, or perhaps was overstating the strength. So why, I guess the other side of this is that because you have created this unique product, another side of the business is that you guys have the possibility of selling the powder to other companies that might be making products as well. Can you give me kind of an idea of what the kind of partners that you might hope to find in that area?
For sure. So on the THC side, it's a little more difficult because we're only licensed in Colorado.
Sure.
Therefore, we can only sell to Colorado manufacturers. But our biggest and best partner right now on the Colorado front is a beverage company called Ojai. And we actually partner with them on both the THC and CBD side. So they make a THC beverage available in Colorado dispensaries. We supply the soluble THC for those products. And then they also have created a CBD drink that we supply the soluble CBD for. Our ingredients business is much larger on the CBD side because there's less regulation there and we can sell out of state. But in terms of ingredients customers in Colorado, we very much stand by the fact that we have created a consistent product that does what it says that we say it's going to do every single time. And those benefits would transfer over to any other product if somebody were using Ripple as an ingredient. So we've done some sort of scoping studies on blood absorption for our Ripple THC product that we're just about to embark on the second leg of. But we can say that Ripple is in the bloodstream within 15 minutes. So one of the problems that you were speaking about to edibles and not knowing what's in the product or not having that consistent experience is you don't necessarily know when it's going to hit. So you might be sitting around for 2 hours and then thinking, I don't feel how I want to feel. You have a little more and then, you're donezo. So having a product that you can feel within 15 minutes, you can feel where you're going, what that experience is going to be. And you don't have to be scared when you sort of get that slap in the face an hour and a half, 2 hours later.
So that's actually leads me into a question that I want to ask about kind of the future of the industry in general, which is that I feel like in 2020 we saw, especially near the beginning of 2020, I read some articles that were kind of asking the question, is this the year that cannabis beverages take off? I've already seen a similar article here in the beginning of 2021. Is 21 the year that cannabis beverages take off or go mainstream? Now, I imagine that COVID and the pandemic has played a large role in the way that we socialize, clearly. And I'm curious how that plays into your overall strategy when it comes to marketing these beverages. How did you think about introducing this to the public, and did that change because of what happened with the pandemic?
Yeah, no, I think if anything, we were more steadfast in our manufacturing practices and what we believe we're making and we're selling, in that people need consistent relief and they are looking outside of pharmaceuticals. And especially now during a pandemic when anxiety rates are at an all-time high and people are just struggling to make it through a day, they need something that they can rely on. Obviously with THC, regulation plays a huge part in all of this, right? So on the THC side, states get to decide. The rules and regulations within each state are different. And for CBD, it's much more national, but we could see just in the rise in sales of CBD starting in March, what the forecast could look like if THC regulation were to open up. This is something that people are craving. They're looking for natural relief.
When it comes to your product, when you've described the product as sort of a cannabinoid supplement, do you think of it as something that is sort of a part of kind of like a health product, or how do you kind of think about the product?
So it has definitely morphed over time. Initially, it was more of that supplement, functional relief. And now I think I see it as kind of like a choose your own mystery. Mystery not being an opportune word there, but that you can use it recreationally. You can use it to get high and you can have a great experience there. And then you can also use it at night when you want to go to bed or after a workout when you're super sore. I think in bringing the various doses into the Ripple lineup, and now with Ripple Gummies and QuickSticks, the different ways to consume Ripple, we're offering people a choose your own adventure. That is what I was looking for. And that you really can use it however best suits you. And I think that's really where we've landed after having been in market for almost 5 years now, is that we aren't here to say what products are going to work for you and how you should be consuming your THC or CBD or other cannabinoids, but we are here to offer you a reliable, consistent product. And here are these awesome ways that you can incorporate it into your everyday life.
And I guess I'm curious, there's a lot of question marks when it comes to the future of socializing and public spaces and how people will interact with those. But, one source of interest in THC or CBD beverages, especially CBD beverages, is sort of as a replacement for alcohol. And I'm curious if that is a market or an area that you are interested in. It doesn't seem to me that your product is necessarily marketed in that way right now, but like, do you think that, CBD cocktails, things like that, things that could be served in, I know that there are additional challenges to that when it comes to serving CBD, but I guess I'm just curious, like, if this will start to become more socially acceptable and what that looks like.
I would hope so. I mean, that has been in our sights all along. We want cannabis to not have the stigma that it still currently does. I mean, it was definitely worse when we started. But in terms of CBD being a replacement for an alcoholic beverage, I just don't think that we are going to get there. It can relax people, but it's not an intoxicant in the same way that alcohol is. I would say that lower doses of THC may provide a similar effect, but without that federal regulation piece, I just don't see how there's enough adoption to sort of take alcohol out of the mix.
So I guess I'm just kind of curious. I've heard you say that you're actually not much of a cannabis user, or prior to beginning Stillwater, it wasn't necessarily a huge part of your life. So I'm just curious how you went from a career in journalism to working at Stillwater.
Well, I'm curious about that as well. My co-founder and I actually grew up together in Michigan. Go Blue. And he had approached me, he and my other co-founder, Jeremy, had approached me with the idea of this tea company. And I didn't even know where to start. And I wasn't going to do it. And then I was doing it, and then I wasn't going to do it. Thankfully, I said, okay. And we started working on it together. But I don't think at the time any of us really knew what we were getting into. It was very exciting, and we recognized that cannabis could be a functional ingredient. And I think that was the ultimate sell for me, was that I saw that we were going to be making a product that I could use. Myself being someone who didn't consume cannabis, was afraid of high doses of cannabis because of past experiences, and just didn't see anything for myself in that landscape. Seeing that we could create a product that I could use, that I could recommend to my friends, to my family, that I wasn't ashamed to talk about, got me really excited. And that sort of got me over the hump. And then once we were in it, there was just so much to do and so much to learn. And we really immersed ourselves in the industry here in Colorado and got to know the people who had been in the industry already for a while, and saw that there was something here for all of us. And now there's just sort of a new struggle every day or a new exciting piece every day that keeps us going. And yeah, so that's how I ended up here. What I'm still doing here remains to be seen.
What about like, I'm always curious about the choice to go into the industry, especially for anybody who has a background in research or is a doctor or something where credibility is very, very important. Not that it's ever not important for anyone, but I'm curious, like as someone who had this background in journalism, did that concern you at all? Moving into this industry, like, do you feel like that was the kind of thing that might lose you a job in the future or hurt your prospects if you decided to go back to writing?
So no, I did not. My father did. And he told me that if I got into the cannabis industry, that it would tarnish my resume and nobody would ever want to work with me again. He's since changed his tune and he loves all of our products. But he had a horrible experience in the medical market in Michigan and didn't see any benefit to the products, didn't have any trust in the industry, which I don't blame him. I mean, I think that's sort of where most people are coming from. I trusted my co-founders immensely. They are both brilliant humans and they're also very caring. And I think the way that we approach everything is we are only making products, or we would not make a product that we would not give to our grandmothers or our parents. And it's much easier to operate from that mindset, knowing that we're creating something good and something that we stand behind and people can trust. It helps us move forward with everything that we do, right? So I think I was absolutely very skeptical, but I also very much trusted what they were telling me and what I had learned in my brief research. And I saw that there was an empty space for us and that we could do some good in this industry.
So I'm not sure if you'll have an answer, and feel free to be like, that's from a different world. But I guess I'm just curious, given your background in journalism, if you ever have any thoughts about how the media covers cannabis in general.
Oh my God. I could do this all day.
Yeah.
So the biggest problem I think that we are facing as an industry is that a lot of the stories that are being written about the industry do not come from a place of informed understanding. And what I mean by that is seemingly a lot of journalists will take pitches or ideas from companies that have big celebrity frontmen and take those sort of as gospel and not do the research to figure out if what they're saying is actually true. Or they'll be pushing ideas that, so something that has been really sort of nagging on us for a while now is all of these companies pushing nano emulsification, nanotechnology, and people thinking like, oh, this is amazing. I need a nano product when really all they're saying is that they made the particle size super small, but they also don't know how that's affecting people, how it's being absorbed, what else that's potentially doing to their product. And I have a really hard time with the industry buzzwords that I think the media is really perpetuating. They're not taking the time to understand base level what the cannabis plant is, how the cannabinoids are extracted from the cannabis plant, what happens when they go into people's bodies. Like, I think there's just this very basic understanding that is not there. And I get it, especially for where journalists are now and what they're trying to do with so very little. You're looking for clicks, you're looking for sort of that pizzazz, and you just want a paycheck. And I get that. But I also think it does the industry a huge disservice because there's so much more here than what most of the headlines in mainstream media that I see are telling.
That's really interesting. And I wonder if some part of it has to do with I sometimes get a sense that when we're talking about news outlets that are traditional news outlets, they're not designed to cover cannabis specifically. There sometimes is a bit of a detached tone, perhaps, from the coverage. And I wonder if that has to do with, I'm not sure how many people covering cannabis actually consume cannabis, and I don't even know if that's necessary. But I wonder how much of this has to do with media perhaps wanting to stay above the fray or out of the fray. I don't know.
Yeah, to cover it at arm's length. I hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting observation. But yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a colleague the other day about how funny it is that with so many of my coworkers, you know, we talk about our cannabis consumption, our CBD consumption daily. In part because they're the products that we make and we have to know what it is that we're putting out into the world. And then also because it's just something that it's become commonplace for us, and as it should be. It's sort of in the same vein of people now being more open about mental health and being willing and open to talking about seeking help, or that they talk to somebody. It still just has that stigma. And so when you talk about people in the media wanting to not have that on them, I get it. And also, I think it's their job as journalists to uncover that story and to give people that basic understanding of cannabis before they talk about products. Like, I have a hard time with people touting these new fantastic nano emulsified products when I don't feel like they have given people enough of an education on cannabis to begin with.
It's a really good point, because I did see I've seen those sorts of press releases before, and I literally had a discussion about that exact question. I was like, so wait, what is different about this?
Yeah. I mean, there is research that nano emulsification affects absorption rate because you are making the particles so small. What they don't mention is when you make the particles that small and there are more of them, there's more surface area. Therefore, it enhances the natural bitterness of the cannabis compounds.
Interesting.
And you also don't know how that's being absorbed in somebody's body with particles that small. Like, is it good? Is it bad? We don't know.
I also think that, there's how the media interacts with politics plays a role in this to some degree. As it stands, I think Joe Biden is on the record saying something along the lines of, I support the idea of cannabis, and obviously it's been detrimental in a legal justice sense. But the kind of refrain, and I mean, he said these words exactly, is that we just don't quite have enough research to fully understand like its impact on the greater society or what long-term use we'll use. And I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure if we can say for sure that we can. The research is a little bit more nuanced than perhaps what people are saying, and I'm not sure that the media always does a good job of checking and double checking. I'll give you one example, and then I'm curious to hear if you have any like misconceptions that you want to speak to, or tropes that you see. One of them that I kind of get concerned about sometimes is when we write or talk about the legislation. A lot of times there's a focus on, and I know this is kind of outside of your circle, but there's a focus on expungements as an important tool. And the thing that always gets left out there or lacks a concrete plan is how to handle people who are currently in prison serving a cannabis sentence. And, I wonder sometimes if I rarely see the question asked. I almost never see the question asked. And I actually wonder if there's a misconception about what an expungement is. And some people just think that that means that we'll let people out of prison, which of course is not what an expungement is. It's just removing something from your record.
Yeah.
It does feel kind of sloppy sometimes, and I'm not sure what that's about.
Yeah, I think when it comes to cannabis regulation in general, it's all extremely sloppy. I think that's in part because, it is state by state right now. And there's no federal guidance, but I can also take this back to CBD first of all, nobody should be sitting in prison for any sort of drug sentence. Like people need help, and that's a whole other episode, but it's just not why you put people in prison. Those people are not a threat to society. Coming out of that, so CBD regulation, we are currently in limbo where the FDA is pretty much saying, you can't have CBD in food or supplement because we haven't issued regulation. But then we have the 2018 Farm Bill saying all cannabinoids derived from hemp are federally legal. And more than 20 million Americans are consuming CBD. So it's putting the public at risk because they are already consuming these products. So they need to be regulated. They need to be tested. The FDA is there to provide a public service and to make sure that people's food and drug supply is safe. So there's just so much from a regulatory standpoint that is unfortunately sloppy, and it's just hurting the consumer. People are going to consume the product whether or not it is federally regulated. That's just where we are now. And so we really need both state and federal to step up and recognize this, and to put the money behind the research, to look at the research that's already been done, that already tells a story, to understand that, if we're making the comparisons to alcohol, which is how the industry was supposed to be set up here in Colorado, we know what that does to a body over time. And yet we find it acceptable enough to serve in bars, and people can go buy it at the corner store. So I just think that there's an imbalance there. And that if we were actually to look at the body of research that is already there and then give money to furthering that, we would find that same as alcohol, if not better.
I guess the question becomes sort of like where those conversations are happening, and how to foster conversations that reach legislators or the people that are making these changes, because it does seem to me that, and this is probably oversimplifying what was a complicated period, but the whole sort of like fiasco that came out of the vape crisis with the vitamin E acetate that was, mostly originating and coming from the illicit market. What we see, because there are lack of restrictions, ultimately what ended up happening was there was a weird conflation of vaping at large. And I think it's not a stretch to say the biggest outcome of that was that a bunch of lawmakers came together and banned Juul. And it was really weird to see people talking about the vape crisis, but then talking about Juul in the same article and not necessarily understanding. I think part of it is that we didn't necessarily know what was causing people to have negative reactions. But it just seemed like very confused, and like public fear was maybe harnessed to do something that really had nothing to do with the issue at all.
Yes.
And so I do think, go ahead.
I think that happens all of the time in our industry.
Because
there isn't that basic level of understanding or that education about how we are regulated, what that looks like, what that means for product in your corner store versus product in a dispensary. And because it is so different, I'm in Colorado. If I go to California, very much the same and so very different. I understand that being in the industry, that I am not going to understand the regulations in each and every state.
I mean, on top of that, the situation that we kind of find ourselves in is that I actually at my corner store right now can not only buy like CBD pre-roll cones from some company that I've never heard of, all sorts of CBD candies or supplements or whatever, literally from the corner store or a gas station. And I can also, I can't buy a jewel pack anywhere in the city, but I could definitely buy any number of different vaping products. Like it's just a very strange situation that we find ourselves in, where they kind of were like, all right, gonna walk away, like did our job. And I don't know that there's in the public really necessarily an understanding. I mean, I know people who smoked vapes that they bought from dispensaries, only ones that they bought legally from dispensaries, who stopped smoking vapes because they're like, I don't know if they're safe or not. Like, I don't know. There's this, I mean, that's damaging to companies, obviously. So this is, it's an interesting question that I got into right at the end of our interview, but I look forward to strengthening the relationship, between us in the media and folks within the industry. When you see something that, you're like, hey, this is wrong. I would really appreciate it if you reach out to us and maybe come back on the show.
Absolutely. Don't be surprised if I'm hitting you up every week.
Well, that's good. That makes we got a lot of work to do. Let's put it that way. Fantastic. Last question for you, Missy. What's next for Stillwater?
We are expanding to Michigan this spring.
Wow. Back home.
So yeah, Justin and I are super proud. Our parents are super proud. And we're excited to expand the Ripple reach.
Fantastic. Well, Missy, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you, Jesse. Same here.
Thanks again to Missy Bradley of Stillwater Brands for taking the time to talk to us. You can find more cannabis industry reporting at trichomes.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can reach the show at highground@trichomes.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at trichomes.com and following us on all social media. For trichomes.com, I'm producer David Fortin. Thank you for listening and be well.